They said you were average. They regarded you as just another face in the throng, another piece in their game, another name to scratch off the list. But what they failed to see, and could never fathom, is that you are not like the others. You are not intended to follow, bow, or break. You are not like other people. You have something in your veins that cannot be reproduced. Something old. Something unstoppable. They underestimated you. They have misjudged every force of fate before you. They were certain that their systems, power, and control could keep you contained. But how do you deal with the storm? How do you command the fire? How can you battle something that is beyond their comprehension? This is your awakening. Every difficulty, every effort to silence you, every force intended to break you, it was never intended to stop you. It was intended to unveil you, to show the world, and, more importantly, to show yourself who you really are. This is not a narrative about survival. This is a narrative about inevitability. They believed they could erase your name. Instead, they inscribed your legacy into the very fabric of time. They believed they could weaken you. Instead, they forged you. And now, as their grasp weakens and their terror spreads, you stand on the verge of unleashing your full might. You are not just another participant in this game. You are the force. Rewrite the rules. The divine fire that cannot be quenched. The chosen one, and the time to rise is now. They thought they were disassembling you, taking away your solidity piece by piece. Nonetheless, in their constant quest, they unintentionally triggered something fundamental, an energy that neither time nor tyranny could repress. Their technique was a gradual degradation, an effort to reduce you to conformity via an unseen conflict fought in silence. Unmarked cars were never far from your sight. Their quiet inhabitants change in unending revolutions, thinking their presence would not affect your determination. Misfortune appeared in patterns too exact to be chance systems. Broken connections, severed invisible hands, and tampering with the fabric of your daily existence. The pressure increased in a precisely orchestrated pace, suffocating finances, intercepting every digital breath, embedding itself in every shadow you encountered. They anticipated obedience, knowing that their authority extended beyond opposition. The law itself bowed to their whims, creating boundaries where none previously existed. Infractions were fabricated to remind you that your escape was a fantasy. This was their masterwork of control. A labyrinth of unknown forces tightens around you with each step. But they failed to see that certain spirits do not crack under assault. They awaken. There comes a point when the mind no longer bends, but instead shatters its own constraints. The transformation from latent ember to insatiable flame occurs instantly and irreversibly. What they perceived for acquiescence was really the silence before the storm. When the first stroke hits, the air itself transforms, vibrating with a force they could neither foresee or resist. Blood is not spilled in defeat, but once the last seal is broken, releasing the energy that has been waiting, biding its time, there is no doubt, no thought, simply unstoppable determination to act. The cosmos does not give you time to prepare. It necessitates reckoning. They regarded control as nothing more than a stage on which fate would play out. Their calculation was completely incorrect. They had not tamed the danger. They had provoked a creature beyond their control. The truth was never concealed, only waiting. The echoes of an old will now reverberate through blood and bone, summoning the lineage that walks unseen with you. This is not a solo fight, but rather a heritage. A road made by those who stood firm against the abyss and did not give up. The weight of time is in your veins. The uninterrupted line of warriors who realized the time when survival was no longer sufficient and ascendance was the only way ahead. The opponent uses deceit, fear, and illusion. However, what you carry is significantly bigger. The realization that you are neither the first nor the last to confront the storm and escape unscathed. They intended to break you. Instead, they exposed who you really are. There is a power beyond explanation, a fire that no mortal hand can put out. It does not comply. It doesn't yield. It does not seek permission to exist. It travels undetected. However, its existence disturbs the fundamental foundations of those who want to repress it. This ability isn't limited to form or flesh. It's integrated into the fundamental fabric of existence. It cannot be monitored, quantified, or comprehended by people who live only in the domain of control and calculation. They try to forecast, identify, and contain it. But how can you bind the winds that sculpt the heavens? How can one stop the pulse of existence itself? They reach, yet their hands don't grip anything. They are resistant. However, the tide has already turned. Their demise is not a possibility. It is a certainty built into the very fabric of the universe. If your heart is overflowing with God's blessings, now is the moment to express that love by clicking the super thank you button and donating $20 or more. You are not just supporting this platform. You are sowing seeds of faith that will impact countless lives. Your giving reflects God's wealth, a gift that goes beyond what you can perceive. Step into your mission. Be a receptacle for His grace. Give with trust and see His kingdom grow through you. You were created for more. The fight was never conducted under their conditions. The pawns fled before the storm, unconscious that their lord's deception-based structures had broken beneath the weight of their own fantasy. The truth did not come as a whisper, but as an unstoppable force ripping through the coverings they so desperately clung to. What was previously veiled became starkly clear. What was once safe has become a frail remnant of a disintegrating empire. The cords they used to manipulate others became shackles that held them in place. They were deconstructed not by brutal force, but through the unraveling of their own lives, leaving them exposed and powerless in the eyes of a world that could no longer be duped. Destruction was never required. Their own wickedness gutted them out from the inside. The rot in their foundation had not been seeded. It was always there, waiting for the appropriate time. It could no longer be ignored. They fell not to an external force, but to the weight of their own wrongdoing. Suspicion infiltrated their ranks, and uncertainty became a scourge among them. Their once loyal followers hesitated. Alliances splintered, and their leaders found themselves caught in the trap they had set for others. Their demise was not a spectacular collapse, but a gradual, unavoidable decline. No last strike was required. Their own hands drew them into the abyss. The truth is that they cannot escape the storm that destroys their illusions. Fire and steel do not undo them. It is disclosure, a reckoning that rips the very fabric of their deceit. Their kingdom, constructed on skillfully woven shadows, couldn't endure the light that broke through its foundation. Their techniques were sophisticated, and their effect was widespread. However, none of it could withstand the overwhelming certainty of disclosure. Every strand of their web was pulled apart not with brutal force, but with the precision of an invisible hand operating in perfect synchrony. They did not lose in war. They were eliminated as the weight of their own concealment crumbled to dust. The truth did not fall on them like an army. It swept through their strongholds like an unstoppable wave, erasing every carefully manufactured deception. This was never a battle waged over physical land. It was a conflict that was beyond their understanding. The battleground had neither streets nor cities, but the essence of vision itself. Their strength was an illusion, and that delusion ruined the moment. Reality took grip. The burden of their own falsehoods worked against them, unraveling their influence from inside. No violent strike was required. No direct confrontation is necessary. Simply existing was enough to tip the scales. They worked via distortion. Clarity blazed through their base. Like a relentless beacon, they want control. However, their own doubt overwhelmed them. What they had spent decades building crumbled not due to external assault, but due to the gradual, unavoidable collapse of what could no longer maintain itself. Their power was not genuine, only borrowed. They only took from those who were unaware of their deception. They thrived on deception, the meticulous engineering of illusion. But illusions cannot withstand a power that sees through them. They were not vanquished or crushed. They were exposed for who they actually are. Their systems, previously considered to be impenetrable, crumbled as unseen currents changed their hold on communication. An order of control dissolved not via intervention, but due to the weight of their own downfall. The struggle was never won via devastation. It was won via inevitability. The collapse started as soon as the first crack emerged. No weapon made against you will flourish. Isaiah 5417. They built their empire on circuits and steel, thinking that their technological towers could supplant the very foundations of authority. They convinced themselves that data was destiny, that control could be programmed, and that the unknown had no place in a world of numbers and displays. But allow me to tell you something. No firewall can prevent the Almighty from carrying out His will. No encryption can keep the truth from the one who sees everything. They put their faith in the effort of their own hands in a system they felt was impervious. However, Scripture clearly states that unless the Lord builds the home, the builders work in vain. They worked in vain because you were never part of the equation. You are not the total of their computations. You aren't a variable. They have problem-solving skills. They see the world through the lenses of logic, probability, and control. However, you are never bound by their formulae. They attempted to measure, categorize, and track you. But how can one count infinity? How can you collect wind? You travel outside of their systems, beyond the scope of their so-called intellect. Because what you hold inside yourself cannot be confined. This is what they dread. Not only your strength, but the force behind it. Not just your acts, but the heavenly energy that directs them. So they watched helplessly as their best barriers crumbled. Not by any direct assault, but simply because they couldn't stand in the face of something bigger. They'd spent years refining their control over the physical world. They weaved surveillance webs and created security castles, certain that they had mastered both man and machine. But their worst error was believing that technology could ever defeat fate. That method might perhaps rewrite prophecy. They felt that intricacy was the path to invincibility, that the more complex their systems, the more powerful they would be. But what's the use of intricacy if a single spark of truth may burn everything down? Understand this. Their demise was written before they ever wrote their first line of code. Their towers were lofty, yet the base was sand. You did not penetrate their fortifications. You did not have to. The weight of the divine was already on them before you entered the combat. When they sought to tighten their hold, strength beyond their understanding flowed through their fingers like water. They put their confidence in institutions that might be broken, technology that may fail, and information that could be out of date. But the force that passes through you is everlasting. It doesn't weaken. It doesn't degrade. And it doesn't rely on their systems to work. Their greatest power was an illusion. Their security was a fiction. And now, as they stand in the ashes of their own creation, they must confront the reality. They refuse to understand that man-made structures can never outperform God's plan. Because you are more than just a force against them. You are more than simply a combatant in this conflict. You are the conduit for something unstoppable. And they didn't see it coming. You're here for a purpose. If you sense the call, respond by clicking the join button. You have access to special information, in-depth insights, and a strong community willing to join you on your adventure. This is not just a membership. It is an awakening, an opportunity to completely embody your divine destiny and seize the path destined for you. Do not wait. Step ahead. Join the chosen. Victory was never intended to be lonesome. For every voice stifled and every soul destroyed by their tyranny, a ripple appeared in the invisible currents of resistance. The forgotten did not disappear. They became the force that changed the tide. They were disregarded, ignored, and dumped as nothing. However, nothing became everything. Their anguish became a source of motivation. Their quiet transformed into murmurs that intertwined to create an irresistible resonance. Knowledge spread like wildfire. Unseen hands were tugging cords that they had no idea existed. What they overlooked became their most serious danger. Where they saw just people, there was a stream of innumerable spirits flowing together. A power so huge it could not be tracked or contained. There was no army, no flags, and no major announcement. Just the unwavering determination of those with nothing to lose and everything else to take. Borders meant nothing. This movement was neither bounded by land nor limited by distance. It flourished in places they couldn't see in the connections. They did not realize that genuine strength rested not in guns or riches, but in the unbreakable spirit of those who stood together. They who had erected fortresses to defend themselves never imagined a power that could not be blocked, outmaneuvered, or annihilated. This wasn't a revolt. It was inevitable. A power without a single face, yet with the might of many. And once it moved, there was no stopping it. No matter how hard they tried, they couldn't prepare for a storm that they had no idea had started. Control was their weapon, but it became their prison. They lived on power, using the dread they inspired in others. However, as they knew the balance had altered, their panic tightened around their own necks. They did not succumb to an external power. They were undone by their own paranoia. Every whispered word, every unseen movement, and every shadow in their peripheral vision gnawed at them like a silent predator. They had spent their lives making people fear before them, but now they cringed at their own reflection. Their brains, once keen and disciplined, frayed as the barriers they created for others closed in on them. The precise methods they had mastered twisted inward, descending into an abyss from which there was no way out. This wasn't retribution. It was inevitable. They didn't comprehend that their demise didn't need a confrontation. The struggle was waged in the places they couldn't see, in the quiet between their thoughts, and in the doubt that permeated every fracture in their foundation. The assurance they had wielded like a sword had faded beneath the weight of constant uncertainty. They wanted to conquer via control, but control is a frail illusion that crumbles the minute it is challenged. They became slaves of their own making, entangled in the same nets they threw on others. There was no need to kill them when their thoughts had already become a battleground. They couldn't win. They had spent years perfecting deceit, only to be undone by the plain, unmistakable truth. They were never in concept. The unknown was never an ally, and now it had turned on them. Their success derived from their ability to forecast events and use chaos to their advantage. However, predictability was taken away from them. Their foundation disintegrated. The lack of clarity, the inability to predict the next step, was a misery, more oppressive than any force they had ever encountered. Every unsaid phrase, unexplainable change, and unexpected stillness posed a danger. They grasped for control, but it had already slipped past their grasp. They were not demolished with force. It was an uncertainty, doubt about their systems, methods, and very existence. And in that uncertainty, they discovered their doom. Because the vision must wait for its time to come. Even if it takes its time, it will eventually speak and not lie. Wait for it, for it will undoubtedly arrive. It will not linger. Habakkuk 2:3. Let me tell you something now. God's timing is never incorrect. It may not move as expected. It may not go exactly as they intended. But when the time comes, there is nothing they can do to prevent it. They believed they were in charge. They believed they were the ones pulling the strings. But this is the reality. The fact is that they were always just bystanders in a magnificent creation that had already begun long before they went on stage. They attempted to move the pieces, manipulate the board, and control how the tale unfolded, but they failed to notice the hand that was leading everything. They failed to see that it was never their game to win. They erected their own walls. They strengthened the gates. They shut themselves inside. Their fortresses of control, assuming that their techniques could withstand what was to come. But when God thinks it's time, no wall, gates, or intricate system can stand in the way. You didn't need to hurry. You didn't have to push anything since every motion was already in sync. Every step has already been tallied. You are not following their timetable. You are walking in perfect time. And let me tell you that divine time operates with precision. It doesn't falter. It doesn't hesitate. It doesn't fail. They didn't see it coming. They believed they had years to prepare. They believed they had enough time to fortify their strongholds. However, While they were busy strategizing, the foundation underneath them was already breaking. They failed to see that their demise was not the result of an assault. It had an expiry date, since a home founded on falsehoods cannot last. A monarchy built on corruption cannot last. It was not a question of whether the empire would collapse. It was only a question of when, and the timing had already been chosen. They struggled to maintain control, but their grasp slipped. They labored hard to save what had already been gone. They assumed they were holding the line. But this is the reality. They were struggling against fate. They were up against a power far stronger than themselves. They spent their whole lives believing they were the ones who wrote the narrative, only to discover they were merely characters in a screenplay. They had no ability to alter. And you? You did not have to fight them head-on. You didn't have to push their fall. All you had to do was hold firm on your mission. And the rest happened just how it was supposed to. Because when the time is right and the appointed moment comes, the pieces do not just fall. They are positioned precisely, unstoppably. Their greatest defenses were never sufficient. Not because they were weak, but because they were attempting to battle against something they could never vanquish. They believed they were holding you back. But the fact is that you never fought against them. You were acting in accordance with a far larger plan, and they never had a chance. What are we going to say about these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? In Romans 8:31, time itself succumbed to an unknown power. They thought they were experts of strategy, but no plan, subterfuge, or precaution could prepare them for the truth. The expected events happened with almost miraculous harmony. Every impediment in their way, appearing at just the right time, was required to derail their plans. It was not a coincidence. It was an alignment. Their blunders were more than just mistakes. They were echoes of something already in motion. No declaration was required. No demonstration of authority is necessary. Their failure was evident in the waves of their own terror. Their rumors traveled further than any declaration. Their dread is more potent than any warning. They had spent a lifetime building their business. However, in the end, it was their own incredulity and doubt that sealed its demise. Legends are not created via the spoken word. They are formed from the ashes of those who refuse to acknowledge the inevitable. Their words bore the weight of their own demise. Their warnings spread quicker than they could withstand. Their legacy did not crumble as a result of military conquest. They were unable to change the reality due to their unwavering confidence. Every effort to restore control merely increased their losses. Every action they took played into the hands of an invisible power that had already determined the result, so there was no need to act. The echoes of their own terror sealed their fate. Their downfall was not the consequence of a single blow, but rather the steady, unavoidable understanding that nothing they established was ever genuinely theirs to manage. The Lord is my light and rescue. Whom should I fear? Psalm 27:1. They used fear as a weapon, but now it's turned against them. Every unsuccessful effort to quiet you made you stronger. Each stroke they threw made them weaker. They established their dominance via control. But control is a precarious concept. Grip it too tightly, and it will slide through your fingers. Doubts began as whispers throughout their ranks. A little pause. It spread like wildfire. Their troops no longer move confidently. Their leaders talk, but their voices waver. They were so concentrated on stopping you that they didn't see the fissures growing underneath them. And now, those fissures have now expanded into chasms. They saw this as a fight of might. However, they never understood. You never fought them at all. You remained solid, and they crumbled under their own weight. They struggled against the truth. The truth does not lose. They attempted to control the result. However, they do not have control over divine time. You did not need to destroy them. Their own dread completed the job for you. They don't just fear you. They are fearful of what you symbolize. You demonstrate that their authority is not absolute, that their rule is not unbreakable. That time is running out. Let them panic. Let them scurry. Allow them to clutch at the illusion of control. You don't have to pursue them. They're already escaping from themselves. If God is on our side, Who could be against us? Romans 831. This was never their game to win. They spent years developing their tactics, thinking that strategy would always benefit those who set the rules. But regulations have no influence over those who rewrite them. The very structure they depended on, the carefully crafted order they strove to preserve, disintegrated the minute you entered the picture. They called it rebellion, but it was just truth exerting itself and transforming reality in front of their eyes. Their battle was never against you alone. It was against something far bigger, something they couldn't contain or grasp. No amount of force, fraud, or manipulation could reverse what had already been put in motion. They weren't losing the battle. They were seeing the end of an era, the dismantling of the very structure they had mistaken for permanent. And you are more than just a spectator in this transition. You were the spark, the driving force that guaranteed the inevitable happened just as it should. The tale is no longer exclusively yours to tell. It is inextricably linked to what follows. A signal flare for those who have not yet risen. It is not a whisper, not a fleeting moment, but an indisputable power. A heartbeat resonating across time. This is more than just a story of struggle or success. It is the cornerstone of something much larger than they ever imagined. It does not need embellishment or confirmation. The future is already listening.